Allure magazine is in the middle of a cultural appropriation debate after they featured a tutorial article teaching white women with fine, silky hair how to have an afro. Okay, so they specifically featured a white model who is, it's kind of incredible because with the afro she looks biracial, but when she doesn't have the afro she looks like the whitest woman on the planet. So there's the example. Very beautiful woman, but it's interesting because the Allure article made it seem as though an afro is either a costume or a stylish trend-setting thing, a way to be edgy with your style. They didn't mention anything about, you know, the symbolism of an afro. Of course, it was a huge symbolic thing for the black community during the civil rights era. Women would wear their hair, men would wear their hair in afros in order to make a statement about black pride. And again, this opens up the discussion about cultural appropriation, something that we did discuss on the show regarding Kylie Jenner and her hair in cornrows. And it's a very complex issue, but the deeper you delve into it, the more you realize that cultural appropriation actually is a really big problem. And the reason why is because there is a double standard of beauty. White women get away with doing these hairstyles, whereas black women get discriminated against for doing these hairstyles. A lot of black women are basically forced into straightening their hair in order to get jobs, whereas if a white woman does it, she's considered edgy and she's, oh, look at her, she's breaking boundaries. So I have a perfect example illustrating that for you guys in just a second, but I want you to jump in a little bit and tell me what you think.
I agree with you. It's insensitive. I mean, if you're going to do this article, you need to make reference to the African American community. Excuse me, African American culture, the black culture, our experiences, what this meant to us, and also it's just as easy as to have this white model put a black model there next to her, or have a black hairstylist, and have everyone be involved in this conversation. See, what happens is when you exclude the African American whose hair naturally would be kinky and curly and would go into the form of an afro, and say, hey, this is some new fashion trend, that's the issue. You know, that's when it becomes a problem. Like, include everyone in the conversation and make sure that we do not feel like you're taking away from our culture and what means so much to us.
Also, I think the biggest issue is just the double standard.
Yeah,
like
course.
just the discrimination that black women face for doing the exact same thing that Allure is applauding for white women. Becca, what do you think?
I think what you really have to look at is how blurred the area between cultural exchange and cultural appropriation really are. That area is just, it's so tenuous, and it all depends on how you interact. And I think you're so right, Karamo, like when the black community is completely excluded from the conversation, and specifically not mentioned at all in this article. They don't talk at all about the context and the richness of this tradition, of this, and it's not just a hairstyle, and the fact that it was like the style section, like retro modern, like 70s look, without even talking anything about the context of the 70s and the Black Power movement, all of that. Of course, you're just like, this is so tone deaf and insensitive. And it could have been a cultural exchange. That was a moment for cultural exchange that turned into cultural appropriation. And I went back and listened to Mandla Stenberg's video that she did about don't cash crop my cornrows. And this kind of came around during the Kylie Jenner situation. And it's one of those things where you're right. It's the more you dig into it, and especially if you're white, and that's just the bottom line, you don't see it because you walk around with white privilege constantly in your little halo in your bubble. So I have to watch these videos and I have to educate myself constantly just so that I can really understand how difficult it is and how it feels as a black woman to watch Allure magazine put that in an article, or a white celebrity just be like, white girls do it better, here are my cornrows, without understanding the dynamic.
And the thing is, when you look at the story on the surface, I know what the argument is, because a month ago I would have made this argument, and thankfully people called me out and I educated myself on this, and I'm like, oh shit, I was wrong. But if you're not really delving into the issue of cultural appropriation, you'll look at a story like this and you'll be like, what the f? Like, okay, so white people are celebrating black culture and they're getting criticized for it. What is that about? You know, and that was the attitude I had. But then you look into it and you're like, okay, well, white people get to do this and they get celebrated. Black people will do this because it's part of their culture and they get criticized for it. It reminded me of a really great friend of mine who has, you know, just beautiful hair that she would wear in an afro, right? And she got hired by a media company that forced her to straighten her hair to be on camera.
Yeah.
And no one has ever told me, Anna, you need to wear your hair like this. It's a privilege that I get to enjoy that a lot of women of color do not get to enjoy.